Good afternoon and welcome to FIDM's first conversation about the Netflix film Mank. We're calling this conversation Setting the Scene Inside the World of Mank. In a moment, on Monday at I can't read right now. On Monday at 5 p.m., you can actually join my buddy, Kevin Jones, who's going to continue the conversation on Mank. He's the director of our FIDM Museum. He'll be in conversation with Mank's Oscar-nominated costume designer and FIDM alumna Trish Summerville. But as we said, tonight we are setting the scene, literally. Jan Pascale was the set director on Mank. She began her career working on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in her hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's worked on many award-winning projects, Argo, Vice, Anchorman, also the upcoming Top Gun Maverick, among many others. Jan was previously nominated for an Oscar for her work on George Clooney's film Good Night and Good Luck, and won an Emmy for set decoration of the television series Boston Public. We'll talk about this part later, but Jan is also a governor of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Designers Branch, and she's one of the founding members of the Set Decorator Society of America. The other person who is joining us this afternoon is Oscar-nominated production designer Donald Graham Burt. Don began his work in the film industry in 1980, and since then he's designed for commercials and episodic television, feature films. In 2009, he won an Academy Award for Best Art Direction, as well as a BAFTA Film Award for Best Production Design for his work on The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Mank actually reunited Don with frequent collaborator David Fincher, who is the director of the film. He has worked on famed films like Gone Girl, Zodiac, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Donnie Brasco, The Social Network, White Oleander, The Joy Luck Club. There are so many more. I also want to point out that work that Don and Jan have done on Mank has already garnered them several awards. The Critics' Choice Award, the BAFTA for Best Production Design and Set Decoration, the Art Directors Guild Award for Excellence in Production Design on a Feature Film, and the Set Decorator Society of America's Best Achievement in Decor Design of a Period Piece. So with all of that said, let me first welcome Jan and Don, and let me start with some congratulations to you on these well-deserved accolades that clearly indicate a job well done. Because we have a pretty diverse audience of folks joining us tonight, some of them may not be familiar with production design, set decoration, so I thought I'd start with a bit of level setting with the two of you. Don, as a production designer, you come first, so I thought we would start with you, and using Mank as the example, maybe you can explain to us what a production designer does.
Oh boy, okay. I've always tried to find a succinct way to describe my job. I'm responsible for anything visual on the screen, in a short sentence there. I am responsible for locations, for sets, for working with the set decorator, working with the costume designer, working with the DP, so that, you know, we create a visual look for the film. And I'm also responsible for interpreting and taking what the director has in his vision and bringing it to the screen. So it's both conceptual and there's a lot of physicality to it as well.
Okay, so then Jan, let's jump to you. And what do you do as a set decorator now that Don has done his work?
Once Don has chosen all the locations and or built the sets, then we set decorators bring all that, we help tell the story. We bring all the furnishings, the draperies, sometimes flooring, lamps, lighting, tables, chairs, you name it, anything that's inside the set that helps to support the character or convey where we are, what the setting is.
So you obviously will probably have to work pretty closely with the director. I have heard there's a rumor out there that David Fincher is a pretty micromanager of a director. So I'm wondering how that process has gone with you all. Like what is that like working with David Fincher or a director then to make it come to life?
Well, I wouldn't say David's a micromanager. I would say David knows what his film is when he starts a movie. He's more than any director I've worked with. He's he has it in his mind, and he doesn't start a project until he's really sorted it out, and he sees the movie inside his head. Having said that, when I first begin, one of my first exercises is just to listen to him and to try to understand where he's coming from and how he wants to express the story and express it visually. And then after that, you kind of walk away with this. I always say it's like a template or a framework. And within that, there's a lot of expansion for creative influence. It's not just, this is exactly what I want. And there's certain things that he will want, but within reason, I think there's a lot of room for creative input for it.
Absolutely.
So you're both then working with his vision.
Oh, absolutely. I think you always do with a director.
And then collaborating to bring your expertise to the table as well.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's always a process of like, a director stating kind of what they were thinking or what they are thinking about a certain set or a certain scene. And then, sometimes playing devil's advocate, what if we did this or did that? And, you'll get the truth out of David. It'll be like, no, I really want to do this, or, oh, that's a good idea. I didn't really think about that. And that's an interesting approach. And, it's kind of that process. There's, being involved in a creative project, there's no one set road that is just, from point A to point B. You kind of have to go through, you follow the alphabet A to Z, and sometimes you end up back at A, and sometimes you end up at M, and that's just the way it works.
I wouldn't mind talking a few minutes about San Simeon, if that works for you both, what we now call Hearst Castle.
Right.
As a California native, we made the pilgrimage as a family to Hearst Castle. Some of our younger viewers may actually know Hearst Castle as only the set of Lady Gaga's GUI music video. But it is a castle in central coast of California built by William Randolph Hearst I think he began construction in the 20s. With the movie implies is the basis of the character of Charles Foster Kane and Citizen Kane. I was actually shocked, Don, when you let me know that you guys weren't allowed to film there. After watching the film, am still unconvinced that you did not film there. How was I so convinced?
Yeah, I don't know how you were convinced. I guess we fooled you. We're the Penn and Teller of production design and set decorators. You're not allowed to film there. It's a national park or a state park, I believe now. And I actually didn't even go there because I had looked at the research and I knew it was so ornate and so indulgent in detail that I'd never be able to replicate it. So I just kind of worked off some basic research that I had. And primarily I relied on research from the period because that was the world we were working in, and that's what we were trying to emulate. And that's kind of how we proceeded with it.
I want to point out that what we're looking at here are photos from your actual research. And maybe if we can hop to the one that was, it's a cookbook that you were able to identify here. There's recipes from Hearst Castle, and then we pulled out some of the language that you had underlined about the size of rooms and things. How much does this inform what you're then doing?
Well, I think it's a starting point. We realized that for the dining hall, which we also used for the Meyer birthday party, the parlor sitting room, that, it was a rectilinear space. And, you just kind of use this as a point of departure. You look at the reality, and then from there you take and you say, well, that doesn't really work for us in this way, but it does work for us in another way. And so it's sort of this, this intersection of what is truth and what we bring to it to make it work for our film.
And then Jan, okay, so we have this space and there's a basic design to it. So, and maybe we can jump to some of these other images and show sort of the work you then do. How do you go about filling this space? Do you search for antiques? Do you create things? What's your role here?
Well, it was sort of a combination platter. We recreated it was a little daunting, I have to say. When John said we're going to build Hearst Castle dining room, I had been to the castle many years ago, and it kept me up a few nights. But we took it bite by bite, and we realized that it was not. At first, I was worried that it was one giant table, which would make it really difficult not only to make but for filming. And we found out that Hearst himself had butted a few tables together. So that gave me a little bit of license. So we did get a great photograph. Our prop master, Trish Gallagher-Glenn, had gone there with her family on a spy mission and took some close-up photos of the grain of the table. And so we were able to actually match the wood grain of the tabletop. So I had the tables built, we had the chairs built, and we found fabric that was very close to the fabric that was there. And then just sort of use that as the jumping off point. Once that was settled, then we could dive into the rest of the room and sort of, you know, we, as Dawn was saying, we weren't trying to replicate it. We were just trying to get the essence of it. And, you know, we certainly didn't have the budget that Hearst had by any means. So we were just trying to, you know, how can we convey this way that's convincing?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we sat and talked about it and we looked at the research, we just sort of zoned in on a few key elements. And we said, if we have this and this, if we have this long table with the chairs, that kind of tells the story of the dining hall, and maybe have the tapestries, because we see that in every photograph. And then everything else can sort of be something that we bring to it. I mean, his place was a little disorganized from the research that we were looking at, and we didn't want that. We wanted it to feel a little more thought out, a little more, you know, decisive in where things were placed. So, you know, we kind of approached all of San Simeon with the idea that let's look for the key elements that tell the story of what it is. And then all the other bric-a-brac that fills in, we'll take care of that ourselves and do it in our own way.
So you're telling me you did not have the budget to go to Spain and disassemble a monastery and bring it here and put it on a—
did not. In fact, the wooden, you were just showing me the photograph with the wooden paneled walls. Well, all the wood paneling is actually vacuform. And I don't know if you know what vacuform is, but it's like a plastic that they take and they suck it down, and the air pulls it over a mold. And you can buy it from the studios, and it's these repetitive pieces, and literally it's plastic on the walls that we painted to look like wood. So it's probably, it couldn't be more the antithesis of what San Simeon is in reality.
Because just, I mean, so from my knowledge, I did know that it was from Spain that he disassembled this monastery.
Yes.
Are those walls the dining hall there, are those walls from that monastery? I'm unclear what's from where.
In the real Hearst Castle, yeah.
In the real Hearst Castle, yeah.
In the real Hearst Castle, yeah.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. And the table came from the monastery. It was the eating table for the monks. And, you know, he would buy all these antiquities from Europe and bring them over just because he could. I mean, he was a huge, you know, he really loved the Renaissance period. He loved the medieval period. He was really into, you know, antiquities from other countries, but particularly Europe. And there are photographs, research photographs of him with all these crates on his property, unpacking all these pieces for his house.
Yeah.
Is it fun as a—
I guess when you have money, you can do.
Is it fun to recreate something like this, or is this just dauntingly difficult?
Oh, it was fun. I mean, it was, you know, my assistant Joni and I had a great time. I mean, it was difficult, of course, and as I said, it was a bit daunting. But, you know, we raided Warner Brothers and Omega prop houses in town, and shopped a lot of vendors that we go to often, Pasadena Antique Center and many other antiquarian traders. You know, we just sort of cobbled everything together and tried our best to get the most I don't know, rich looking furniture that we could.
Mhm.
And accessories, you know, the silver, and, you know, we had set dressers polishing silver for days. And we actually did find the dishes that Hearst used, which was a blue willow pattern with a gold scalloped edge that we bought on eBay, one and two at a time, or, you know, that was a little nightmarish, but
And and then if I'm not mistaken, did you learn that from that cookbook we were looking at? I had read that in your research on one of the pages, what his plateware looked like.
Yeah, there were photographs of the place settings, and we got as close as we could to the real silverware and the real place settings and the glassware, we opted not to, we talked to David about this, but we opted not to put the Heinz ketchup and mustard bottles on the table that Hearst always had on the table, because he called this place the ranch. So we,
Okay. So
we
it's,
did a lot.
you're talking about some exceptional detail, right? Down to the mustard and ketchup bottle, although not on here, but the plates, the serviceware, you know, to sort of make a pun on this, who are you serving? Is this, I, the audience, wouldn't know the difference if you put one plate or another. Does this, is it for me? Is it for the actor? Is it for you? What are you creating, and why the focus on such specificity?
Well, I don't know. We always try to be, if we're doing something that is known from history, you know, I always try to be as accurate. I know Don does as well. We try to be as accurate as we can. And again, it's, you know, we still distill it to the essence of it. But I think it does help the actors. I think that that's part of our job. I think part of our job is to make it feel right for the actors and the director and ourselves, of course, because you don't want to put a contemporary, you know, I'm not going to put a, you know, Pottery Barn dish in there. You know, it's just, I just
Pottery
think
Barn will love that comment.
sorry, Pottery Barn.
They're not a
No,
sponsor of the show.
Yeah, I think the point kind of is that you're coming into a stage and you know that you're not at the real San Simeon, for instance. And anything we can do to help, you know, mitigate that so that the actors especially feel like, oh, I am in this place and I am in that time. I think it helps. And if you can do it with a few details, you know, for instance, like the servingware and the dinnerware, the glasses, the table, maybe not exactly the same, but, you know, certainly rendering the same feel with the shape and the length of it. And, you know, all of a sudden it transforms a stage into that place.
Yeah. And I feel like it really made a difference, because we could tell even the, and this is a great compliment to Trish, our costume designer as well, and Gigi, the hairstylist, that because the background actors and the cast actors really held themselves in a different way. They carried themselves in a way that was more of the era. You know, I think everything coming together really helps tell that story, and it helps them embody what they needed to.
The film also featured two other primary locations, at least from my point of view. You probably would disagree and say, no, there's many, many more, but the ranch in Victorville and then some sets in Hollywood. Let's talk a little bit about those, and thinking about, like, here's pictures of the Paramount lot in the 1930s. This has moved on to the 2020s. How do you go about recreating these feels and even these looks? And here we're looking at the film. What's the approach? And Jan, maybe we'll start with you.
Well, we wanted to, you know, back in those days, in the golden age of Hollywood, there were a lot of different productions going on at the same time. So you were likely to see a circus set, you know, The Greatest Show on Earth or something like that, and many other shows in the going on in the background, and equipment moving from stage to stage, because it was the studio system, and things were often shared among one and, you know, other productions. So we wanted to have something for this one in particular. We wanted to have something graphic in the foreground. So we talked to David and said, what about a circus? And he loved the idea. So we were able to get all of these great period pieces. And the movie equipment, that was a little daunting, because David is encyclopedic in his knowledge of movie equipment, right, Don?
Oh, yeah.
So he knew exactly what lighting it should be, and exactly what camera equipment it should be, and exactly what dollies it should be. And, you know, luckily we have a great prop house in town, History for Hire, who has all of these things. And they're encyclopedic as well. So they were able to help us. So it was really exciting to set the scene for these backlots. And for Don and I both, it was a lot about hiding the 21st century.
Yeah, contemporary elements. I think also with the studios, it's important to realize that we approached it. We knew that certain stages had been built in the time period. You know, of course, they've been replastered and they've put up different doors and they've had other, you know, things added to them that bring them into our century. But we had to be selective in what we chose as a location within the film studios. You can't just walk around and take any street or any alleyway because it looks good. So, you know, it was about, you know, being judicious and being selective and saying, okay, we can look down this alleyway, but then we're going to have to cut and we're going to have to move over to this portion of the studio and do the walk and talk. And then we can't complete that there because we get into trouble with some contemporary buildings. So let's move to another little section of the studio. So it was kind of a little bit of a piecemeal in some places, but for the most part, the alleyways, we found a couple alleyways at Paramount and at Warner Brothers, and also at MGM. We cheated actually Warner Brothers for MGM for this scene that you're seeing on the screen now. But we found some alleyways and some areas of those studios where we felt like, you know, it maintained sort of the integrity of the period, and we were able to use them. But again, it was selective.
I'm curious if we can hop to the next picture that shows the Hollywood land sign in the background. I'd like to spend a second on this if we can. I spoke earlier this week, Don, with a former collaborator of yours, Stephen Prieg, who you worked with on Benjamin Button. He was the visual effects artist who also took home an Oscar for that film. And we had a discussion for a FIDM event about visual effects and you know, ranging around what they've done with The Mandalorian and many other things. And it made me wonder, as I then went and watched this film, in the back on this image, you see the Hollywood sign, but it is the Hollywood sign of old, which includes Hollywood land.
Correct.
And I don't know even if this shot is practical today toward a sign in the background, which then of course got me thinking about visual effects and how you think about that. So I don't know if you want to talk about this specific image, but how do visual effects come into the work that you're doing?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a tool that is used, and it wasn't something that we relied upon, but we knew we were going to need it in certain situations. And as we scouted and as we looked at locations, we would talk about certain areas where we would need visual effects. And then of course, when they get into the edit, which comes much further down the line after I've left, you know, certain things pop up where they say, you know, we really need to do something here. We need to do something there. We always knew we'd do the Hollywood land sign here. We always knew we had some cleanup to do on the left wall over the side. And we had some posters or some giant billboards for films there on the walls that we did. And we always knew that going in. And we tried to gather research for that. We try to put together illustrations. We try to give them a toehold so that when they get into post-production and they're looking for a direction or they're looking for a design style, they have something that they can grasp onto. There were some instances I noticed in the film, and I thought they did a beautiful job of areas where we hadn't really discussed needing some visual effects, and they added some things that really, I think, helped the story a lot. And I think particularly in this film, the whole concept behind the matte paintings was sort of to do them in a style from the 30s and the 40s. It felt like, you know, they weren't so absolutely perfect like what we see today, you know. Yeah. At least that was my take on it when I looked at it, you know.
Let's also then move out to Victorville, where another big portion of the film happens. We have some interior shots here too, and we can come back to if you guys want to discuss these, but the North Verde Ranch in Victorville, which is an actual location and it still exists, is that right?
Yes, it did. I mean, you know, we were the beneficiaries of something. When I first read the script and so much of it took place there, I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to pull this off? And where am I going to do this? And then lo and behold, the ranch still exists. It's called the Kemper Campbell Ranch. It needed quite a bit of work to it. But for the most part, it was intact from the period. And certainly a lot of the interior was. We didn't film the interior there, just the exteriors. We had to remove air conditioning units. We had to redo their patio area. They had some concrete. We put in flagstone. We had to restore some of the wood. There was quite a bit of work to do. And with the whole picture, going around the locations, when you realize you're dealing with something from almost 100 years ago, at first you think, oh, this is great, whether it be this ranch or whether it be the studios or whether it be Bullock's Wilshire on downtown Los Angeles. You think, oh, what a great location. It looks like the period. And then when you really start looking at it and you walk around with your crew, before you know it, you have about 12 pages of notes of items you have to address to keep it from having little, instances of like security cameras or electronic doors, swipe card, entry devices, things like that. And, it's a lot of legwork the art department has to do that isn't really gratifying, but we do it because we know. And once you know, it's kind of hard to get it out of your mind. But coming back to the ranch, I didn't mean to digress there. David and I scouted it. We walked the interiors. There were several different rooms that we liked. There were several different architectural elements. And we just sort of configured something that worked for us in terms of that space that he was sequestered in. And we kind of made it into a living room / den that his bed was brought into. And we tried to give it some depth by putting a kitchen to the side and a hallway to another side. So we took the language of the place and we expanded it a bit and gave it a little more dimension. But architecturally, we kept it in the language of what that is, with the adobe and the wood floors and the brick fireplaces.
So Jan, what is your challenge as you look at these images that we're showing? What was the challenges you confronted as you approached, this ranch, this thing that actually existed?
Well, as Don said, once we eliminated the 21st century from the exterior, tackling the interior with the set that Don designed was actually kind of a great challenge. We found this great stove and trying to get period fabrics that were the right essence, I guess is the best word. Is always a challenge. We wanted to be stay within the ranch idea, but yet get some patterns. We had a little bit of lace to get some patterns for David, and we used a lot of Monterey furniture, which was very popular in the era. And one of the things I always tell Don that I loved about what he suggested at the end while we were finishing up dressing was that he suggested that we do a layer of dust around the edges because it's in the desert and there's only a screen door and the dust would blow in. And I just feel like that, and you can see the dust beams in that ray of light.
Yeah.
It added that extra layer of, okay, now that we were fully dressed, just add that dust around the edges. And I think it really helped us.
When we were talking about the San Simeon set, you guys spoke about sort of, I don't want to say the simplicity that you brought to it, but you didn't go into exceptional detail. But I look at this and I feel like there's so much detail here. So is this the opposite, or do you bring the same approach to this set?
Yeah, it's sort of, this is a ranch house where people would come and go. So we sort of approached it as there were things that people who would stay there would find in the desert and bring inside. So we have antlers and arrowheads and rocks and, just little bits, tumbleweeds and mesquite and things like that. So it's sort of, you want to give the house a little bit of a history. The house becomes sort of a character itself.
I think it's purposeful dressing, it's always dressing it, whether it's feels cluttered or whether it's simple, as to, what is the function of it here and who left it and who sat on it last and why is this ashtray on this table and not on that table, and all those kind of things that need to be thought out to make it feel real. You don't want to just bring things into a space and just place them there. You want them to be there as if they have lived there. And I think that's part of the challenge that Jan and her team have, and that we all have in the art department. And that plays off as well for construction with the walls and with the painting and the scenic work. It's interesting as you have the kitchen up there, in terms of process, and I don't know if your students are interested in this or not from the design standpoint. It's kind of interesting when you get into things like kitchens and certain rooms. As we're designing, we rely heavily on Jan and her team to come forth with, sizes and measurements on certain elements. And I sit here and I look at this stove, and I remember talking to the set designer about the cabinetry, saying, we need to get the measurements. We need to find that stove so we can get the measurements on that. And then we can come about this sort of backwards and determine what size cabinets we need in that corner. So, there's a lot of crossover in terms of design. It's not just us sitting down and drawing up and saying, this is what we want and handing it off to Jan. There's a lot of, integrated, contributions to how it comes about, like she'll show me pictures of different stoves and say, I think I found the perfect one. I'll say, okay, what size is it? Because now I need to go to the next step and the next layer,
I would like to come back in a few moments and talk about, Jan, your role on the board of governors of the Academy. Before we get to that though, Don, because you just brought up students, and I know a lot of our audience are students and our alums, members of the SDSA who have studied the space that you all work in along with you all. I have been privileged enough to speak with you beforehand to know that there's a very good story about how both of you sort of arrived in this work. And I wonder if you can take us through that story just briefly, how you got to doing what you now do. And Don, maybe if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. I'm a victim of art school in the 70s. Back when I went to a very liberal art school in Arizona, and it was more about how you think than it was about what you produce. And I remember that from my professors. It was during the sort of conceptual era, and there was a big emphasis on that, which at the time I thought was great, because here I am, I can do whatever I want in college. And then when I graduated, I thought, oh, I probably should have learned a few more of the technical skills. But then as I've gotten older, I look back on so much of it, and I remember one professor saying to me specifically that you won't come away with a great body of work, but you'll come away with a way of looking at the world, of observing things. And that's always stayed with me. And I appreciate that, 4 years of tuition and hard work, I appreciate just getting that. When I graduated, I didn't know what to do. I sort of stood there like, okay, I came through art school, what do I do now? I took odd jobs, and I went to career services. And in those days, they had a board up with index cards and thumbtacks. And I remember the gentleman, and he was so kind to me. He said, there aren't a lot of opportunities in art. And he came down and he found a janitorial floor cleaning service. And that's what I did out of college. I worked at nights with one of those machines that scrubs the wax off the floor, and then you redo it while everybody's out of the store, and you do it by yourself and or with one other person. And that's what I did for quite a while, until I came and ran into a couple of my colleagues from art school who were graduate students. And they had opened up a small, very small scenery shop in Tempe, Arizona, doing regional commercials and trade shows, whatever they could get. And they needed some help. And I went over and helped them. And I began to work for them a little more consistently, primarily doing things like sweeping floors and picking up lumber in a truck and odds and ends jobs and anything there was. And somehow it developed, and they moved over to LA and opened up a shop. And I kind of went up through the ranks of a scenery shop, from carpenter to plasterer to painter to, I did props, I did set decorating for commercials in the 80s and for videos. And I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with a company that was successful during that time period in the commercial video world. And one thing led to another. And then it was a DP, actually, Amir Mokri, who I'm forever indebted to, that suggested to Wayne Wang that he hire me for Joylet Club. And that's where I took my first step into films. And I had no idea what I was doing. And they were very patient with this this man from the Midwest that had never experienced a film. And that's kind of one thing led to another, and that's kind of how it all worked. So for all you students, there is hope.
Students and the alums, don't forget those ones.
Oh, the
struggling as
alums, yeah.
janitors right now, yeah. Jan, how much time in the janitorial field did you spend? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. What's your background? Tell us your story.
Well, I thought I wanted to be a shrink, and that didn't work out. And but it does help, I have to say.
Yes.
I was a retail store manager, and my roommate wanted to be an actress, and so I've started volunteering at the theater that she was involved with in Pittsburgh, and through that I met some folks who worked at Mr. Rogers. So that was actually my first job in this business, was at Mr. Rogers, painting the dots in the neighborhood of Make Believe. So I actually learned color from the production designer there, Ms. Jack Guest, who really taught me color. He came from black and white world, oddly enough. And he really taught me the grayscale and taught me color. And I became the prop master there for a few years, and then did theater. And my first film was Creepshow. And I had these fabulous scenic artist ladies in Pittsburgh who taught me so much. My first day I started wood graining, and it was incredible. Cletus Anderson was the head of Carnegie Mellon drama department, and he was the production designer. So I learned a lot. They taught me about aging and washes, and it's invaluable. And you know, as Don said, one thing leads to another. On a commercial in Pittsburgh, someone said, "Hey, do you want to come to LA and finish this commercial?" And who was I to argue? But it's just, you know, it's meeting people along the way who were kind enough to take. I mean, I actually scrubbed buckets. They didn't make me scrub the floors, Don. I had to scrub buckets.
I still love to sweep a stage floor to this day. Jan will tell you, you'll see me off to the side. It's like therapy, and I just still love it. There's nothing like a broom, you know.
My favorite is still a well-coiled wire.
Yeah.
I was taught that on the first set I worked on in my first year in college, and I still love, like, my hose, if it's well coiled in my backyard, over under. I'm a happy camper. My takeaways from the two of you, just like, I hate to underline it, but I want to underline it, is you got to learn from others.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, we all head on our own unique journey, which I think is so important to remember. And the other thing too is, you know, it's the line from Pretty Woman. Welcome to Hollywood. What's your dream?
Yeah.
Keep going, you know, just keep going. Speaking of dreams, I'm assuming several of our viewers this evening might dream of being an Academy Award winner. Jan, you are a member, as I said at the beginning, of the Academy's Board of Governors. I want to ask you a little bit about the process and sort of how it works from your point of view. The Oscar category you are nominated for is called Production Design. It includes both you and Don as production designer and set decorator. So two questions from this. Which Academy voters vote for production design? And then as a production design voter, which I know that you are, what is it that you're looking for that you think makes outstanding production design?
Wow. Well, we nominate amongst ourselves. So our branch nominates the best work in production design, hopefully. Among ourselves. We nominate for production design and for best picture. So each branch nominates for their own branch. And then the entire Academy votes for everything. Okay. There are certain requirements with international films in order to whittle down from the 100 and some that we get. You have to sign, you have to be on that committee. There's a documentary committee. There's certain things like that. But it's whittled down, and when it's the 5 nominees or 8 Best Picture nominees, that is open to the entire branch for voting. The way I do it, the way I vote is I keep a spreadsheet as I watch movies through the year. I keep a little notation of what I like and what I think had great design. And I don't know, Don can chime in too, but I feel like if the design supports the story, it's, you know, and doesn't stand out unless it's supposed to stand out, I think that that makes my list. And then when I'm really voting, I watch the movie again with no sound and I just look at the sets. And that's how I vote for the finalists. That's just my crazy method that I've developed over the years.
Like the whole movie at regular speed? Are you doing 2x? Like what?
No, sometimes regular speed. It depends. If the sets are really interesting, I'll watch it at regular speed, but sometimes I'll speed up. But I just watch it for the design when I'm really voting.
Wow. Don, do you have any interesting approaches?
I just sort of, I watch the films and I just go with what my instinct and my heart tells me. That's all.
Okay, nothing scientific.
It's that simple, I don't try to overthink it and I don't try to underthink it, I also try to look at certain films and think, well, maybe the movie isn't so great, but this aspect of it is wonderful, and it's well done. I don't think that you can always tag the good craftsmanship, whether it be directing, production design, costume design, or whatever, to whether or not the movie's a success. It's not fair.
Let's get to some of the questions from our audience. This one stands out to me. How did the film being in black and white change your design process? Some of the challenges that maybe you confronted with that.
Actually, I just answered one of those questions. I just saw questions pop up. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to type an answer or what. But,
whatever you want to do, sure.
Yeah. The black and white was, in the beginning, we did a lot of testing. It was kind of an interesting experience because we were filming in black and white. We weren't filming in color and then transferring it to black and white. So we kind of went through the whole process of like, what colors look best in black and white. And, we found that greens and oranges and mustards kind of really resonated with the black and white and gave it some depth. It kind of changed when David sort of standardized the approach with the camera that he was using. He realized that the noir filter on our cell phones was very close to it or almost the same. And he told us to start documenting whatever we did with that filter. And so we did. And before we knew it, it was nice because Jan, the Trish Gallagher-Glenn, who she's referenced several times, the prop master, the set construction, the scenics, all of a sudden, all the information on the visuals, whether it be paint samples, whatever, were being sent to everybody through this filtering. So we were all on the same page with things, and we're able to sort of devise a sort of a language of color that we could use. It was important for us with the sets not to paint them mustards and oranges and greens, as I just said. It was important to paint them real colors. So we had to find grays and neutrals that worked because we didn't want the actors coming into San Simeon with stone walls that were painted green and orange. It's just too much of a carnival, and I think Jan can speak a little more about this because she actually did a project where that was the way they executed some of the sets.
Yes, when we did Good Night and Good Luck, it was a totally different process, and we shot in film. And with Jim Bissell and Krista Monroe, we realized that it was shapes and values because it was a $7 million movie, and that was it, all in. And we just didn't have the budget to paint anything, any set dressing. So everything that we got, it was shapes and values. So Krista developed our own grayscale, and we held the grayscale up and shot a photograph and printed everything in black and white to see how the value works. So when you walked onto the set, there was this cacophony of color. And Dawn and I talked about that at the beginning, and the having the noir filter was so much better because Joni, my buyer, and I could just shoot everything through the noir filter and through our regular lens. And we wanted it to be pleasing to the eye when we walked in. We could sort of adjust what we needed and know what it would look like in the noir filter. It was really fascinating.
And it's so interesting that you can use the cell phone now as part of the part of the process is just fascinating to me as well. I think you guys answered one of the questions, but I'm curious to dig in a little deeper on that piece about how long it takes to do this, because I know, Don, you told me before you had signed up for a certain period of time. I can't remember the length, but you actually did more work. And then Jan, you actually came in later than you normally would on this specific project. So, clearly it's not affecting the outcome, but what does the timing typically look like?
Oh, typically, oh gosh, depending on the project. I mean, I always start much earlier than anybody. This one had a strange schedule to it almost. The physical production, the actual production from the studio was late August, I believe, like the last week of August. And I was presented with the project in February of that year. And I knew I wanted to do it. So I just I didn't pursue other work. And, David and I started 6 weeks before the official production start date, because we always want to spend time alone. And we get so much more done when we aren't coming back to an office where there's so many people that are asking us questions and pushing and pulling on us. So we just took advantage of it. And that's when I think we really made the movie. 12 weeks was a challenging prep for a movie of this type. And Jan, unfortunately, didn't come on until I think 8 weeks out. So I had several months actually that I was just sort of doing research and, absorbing and immersing myself in the project.
Jan, does that shortened length of time impact you? I guess maybe the better question is, how did it impact you? Yeah.
Not much sleep. Well, it takes a while to process I mean, luckily Don and David and Robert Benavides had developed a lot of research. But it takes a lot of time to really take in all that research and see what kernels of that we need to bring it to the set, to translate it to what we needed for the set. So it takes a good few weeks to just get into that frame of mind and immerse yourself in the period and in the 30s and in Hearst Castle and the movie sets and learn the equipment. So it's a crash course, definitely. It's definitely a crash course in research and learning, and frankly, that's what makes the job exciting. I kind of relish that part. And then we see, many conversations with Don. I'm one of the ones tugging on his sleeve saying, what about this? And what about that? and bugging him as much as I can.
One last question for you all, and then I will let you guys get going. I know you have more to do this evening. What would the advice be you would give an aspiring production designer or set decorator? What would you say that they should do? Jan, maybe, do you want to start?
Observe.
Mm-hmm.
I always, when I speak with students at FIDM, I say observe and listen. What is the point of the story? What's the story you're trying to tell? And if you're creating a situation that's a living situation, watch when you come home, where do you put your keys? Where do you empty your pockets? That sort of thing. If you want to create an environment that looks natural, you just need to think, when someone sits at a desk, where do they put the stapler? And some of my dressers, I drive them crazy because I say, sit at the desk. How is it? Where's your computer? Where's your stapler? Where's your tape? Just observe.
Don?
I would say be willing to do anything to get your foot in the door.
That too.
And once you do that, be humble and listen to the people around you, listen to the people you're working for, absorb from them and learn from them, watch and listen to them, what they do and how they do it, and be attentive, and be patient.
We'll take that. Patience, hard work, do anything, and observe. I also took from you, Don, listen. I think that's another big important.
Oh, right. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I so appreciate the two of you spending the last hour or so with us.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank
informative.
you.
congratulations on all of the awards you have won. Hopefully we wish you the best on the one to come, which is of course the Oscars. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
The conversation here at FIDM about Mank continues Monday with a conversation with Oscar-nominated FIDM alum costume designer Trish Summerville. We also have an online lecture on textile design coming up, and later in the month, design and business majors info session. At that particular session on design, you could actually learn more about our visual communications program, as well as our entertainment set design and set decoration program, both of which are terrific runways to get you into this type of work, if that's what you're interested in. We thank you so much for joining us. We especially want to thank Don Burt, production designer, and Jan Pascale, set decorator on Mank, for all of their time with us. And we invite you to, of course, always stay inspired and have a great evening.